Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tribe Life, where we talk to parents about life, about being parents, about things they're going through, struggles they're going through, successes they're having, and just get a different perspective on parenthood than what my wife and I have. My name is Pat Barber. I will be one of your hosts. My wife will be another one of the hosts. This is actually episode number 0, so it's before episode number 1, and we figured we would just tell our story of how we met and kind of a little bit of who we are before we got into going and interviewing other people. Episode 1 will be just afterward, released at the same time, and episode 1 will be a conversation between Taz and I interviewing each other. We wanted to start off with getting a good sense of where we both stood on things, and we already knew, but it was good so you can kind of hear our perspective and where we're coming from. So episode 0 is this. It's going to be me and Taz telling our story. Mainly me. Taz enjoys it when I tell this story, so that was why we chose to have me do it. But you'll hear her interject as we go through. So enjoy episode 0 and 1 as well, and look forward to doing many, many more in the future. I'll tell you a quick little story, and I won't go too in detail to how we met, but basically Taz and I both compete in the sport of CrossFit, which, as anybody who knows, is slightly different than the training methodology of CrossFit, where you just go in and do CrossFit for life. The sport is where you go out and you compete, and you look to be the best at being fit. Basically the best at exercising. And in 2009, they started up some world qualifiers where they started involving people outside of just who could get to Aromas every year. And those qualifiers involved people setting up a regional event where everyone from the region got together and threw down, and they would pick the top 3, I believe, from each region, top 3 or top 4, male and female from each region. And that was in 2009. In 2008, when you could just walk up to Aromas and do the games, I walked up to Aromas and did the games and happened to place 4th, which by the rules at the time gave me a free bid into next year's games, which were the 2009 games. 2009 rolls around, those regionals happen. That allows Taz, who lived out in New Zealand, she went over to Australia and competed in the Australia and New Zealand. Was Asia involved in it too?
I don't think there was anyone in Asia at the time doing it.
Maybe not.
It might have been, but it was Australia and New Zealand. Yeah,
so it was basically Australia and New Zealand, and they had a big old event, regional event, and Taz came out on top of that. There's some spectacular old photos of Taz throwing down in that event. And after that, she was going to fly out here to the States to compete at the games. And at this time, I was working for CrossFit headquarters on a back end, building the website and setting up posts and kind of doing some video work for them. And in 2009, there wasn't many positive media productions on CrossFit. So there was nothing that had come out being like, look at this awesome CrossFit stuff. It was mainly like, CrossFit's killing people, and no one had any real public understanding of what CrossFit was. And the New Zealand main news station did a movie on Taz, or did a little segment on Taz, and it was one of the first pieces of positive media that wasn't produced by CrossFit that I had ever seen. And somebody sent that to me, and I was like, oh man, this is really cool. And so I reached out to Taz, and I was like, hey, do you mind if we use this?
I think you just wanted to post it on your Facebook or something.
I wanted to post it on CrossFit's. So I wanted to repost it on CrossFit stuff. So I reached out to you and was like, hey, is there any chance we could use this? And you're like, yeah, no problem. Good to go. And that was the gist of my entire interaction with her. She happened to mention this to her business partner, whose name was Darren. And Darren was like, do you know who Pat is? Because I had a name in the community for, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I had a name in the community for I had been around for a long time, and I had done well at the games the year before, and I lived in Santa Cruz. So he was like, do you know who that is? And she's like, no, I don't really know who that is. I don't care. I'm so awesome. My name is Taz. And she said that. And she's like, I don't even follow this stuff. And so he's like, well, that's Pat. He lives in Santa Cruz. You should ask him if you can train with him while you go to the games and get ready for the games. So she reached out to me on Facebook and asked if she could come train at CrossFit Santa Cruz, which is where I currently was at. And I asked Hollis and Danielle, who own CrossFit Santa Cruz, and they were like, yeah, absolutely. So Taz had planned to like come out and train at CrossFit Santa Cruz with me. Now, to give some perspective, in the CrossFit world, there are massive amounts of strong, confident, beautiful women. And I, being the position I was, got to meet a bunch of strong, confident, beautiful women all the time. So it wasn't something that stood out to me as particularly unique. I was in a relationship at the time, and so my mind was not on meeting somebody. And when Taz came over, I met her, and I was like, cool, another strong, confident, beautiful woman. Like, great. And there was nothing that immediately kind of set my heart a pitter-patter, because it wasn't anything particularly unique to me. And when you first meet her, she's kind of quiet, and you can't tell whether or not she's just disapproving of everything you do.
You mean I have a resting bitch face?
She has a resting bitch face, pretty hardcore. But she's not like that once she gets to know you, or even once you get to know her and you realize that's just like she's just quiet and doesn't say much. She's not a loud idiot like myself. And cut me off if I ever say anything wrong, Taz. And what ended up happening was, because for me, a sexual relationship was off the table, because I was a faithful person to my girlfriend at the time. And because she was just another girl, like that was off the table for me. And what that allowed me to do was get to know her with that not being part of the equation. And we spent like 2 weeks together.
Yeah, it was about that.
It was about 2 weeks, and it coincided with, we both needed to train for the game, so we were together a whole bunch. She didn't really have a car, so I kind of drove her around. My girlfriend at the time had gone out of town.
Looked after your dog.
Well, and while she was out of town, I had to teach a seminar, so Taz ended up looking after my dog at the time, who I say fell in love with her before I did. And then when I came back into town, when my girlfriend was in town, my girlfriend got sick, so I couldn't be with her because I didn't want to be sick for the games. So we spent some time apart, and it was this like whirlwind of events where I spent a whole bunch of time with her, and it showed me what a relationship with someone of the opposite sex could be, or someone who I would normally be attracted to would be, without sexuality being part of the equation. And that was really unique for me, because most of my relationships have been based on that when up to this point in time in my life. And it was just awesome. It was to me, it felt like just a friendship, like a really good friendship. And it was so different than any relationship with a girl I'd ever had. And we got along in so many ways, like how she thought was so similar to mine, and we had a similar value structure and a similar way of being, and a similar level of confidence. And it was so different than I'd ever experienced. And it just showed me what it could exist with a woman. But I'm like, okay, this girl lives in New Zealand. There's no way it's going to ever work. We'll just let that be an illuminator for my life of like, hey, this exists out there. And so she went off and she left and went back after the games to New Zealand. And me and my girlfriend at the time broke up. And then Taz and I had been messaging via, at the time, Skype, because FaceTime wasn't a thing because we're so old. And we had been messaging over Skype, and Taz was like, hey, I'm going to come visit you. I was like, cool, she's going to come visit me. Finally we can explore the other sides of this relationship. And for me, I was like, it could never work. She lives in New Zealand, I live in the States. And she came out, and I originally treated like the first day just super surface level, and she immediately caught on to my BS and was like, yo, what are you doing? And I was like, and just called me out straight up. And I was like, you're right. She's just like, let it happen. We'll just experience each other and just have some fun. And so we did. And I just opened myself up to the idea of a relationship working with a girl in New Zealand. And then things just fell into place, thing after thing. Like I stopped working for headquarters, and then I got a job working for Again Faster Equipment, which allowed me to work anywhere in the world. And I was able to fly and move to New Zealand. She had enough money at the time to be my sugar mama and fly me and my dog out to New Zealand and live with her for a couple of years in New Zealand and really get to see what a relationship with this person could be like. And it wasn't like easy breezy, beautiful cover girl. There was a bunch of issues along the road, but it wasn't like, I never looked back personally. I never thought that there was another person in this world that I could spend the rest of my life with. And Taz and I, if you ever talk to us, neither of us are like true love type people and like, oh, you find that person and it's like, oh, it's fate and da-da-da. Like neither of us are like that. And meeting her and having the experience that I had, like, has definitely changed my opinion of what's possible relationship wise and out there in the world. That's my version of the story. I think Taz's goes something along the lines of like, you had a sweet butt and I figured I'd take you home with me and test this butt out for a little bit. And like, that's
your
that's
Australian accent?
No, that's my Kiwi accent. That's my Taz accent. If you're listening, it probably sounds identical what Taz sounds like, I'm sure, right?
Mm-hmm. Mine's always, when everyone always asks how we meet, I like usually just point to you because you're very good at telling the story. You give like the juicy details.
Right.
Normally I just say, well, I went and trained for a couple of weeks and we just got along really well and we hung out and and then we just went back and forth from New Zealand to Santa Cruz. And then you came and lived with me in New Zealand and then we came back and lived here.
So that's Taz's version of the story. It's a little quicker than mine.
But I do remember meeting you for the first time and like you were like, oh, I wasn't anything great, which is fine. That's fine.
Oh, I didn't say anything great. It just didn't like jump out at me.
Well, yeah. I mean, the feeling was mutual. I wasn't
Okay.
like, I didn't meet you and be like, wow, this guy.
Right.
Like, it was more like, oh he's smaller than looks on the
If
TV.
you didn't catch that, Taz said he's smaller than he looks on TV. Everyone's smaller on in person than they are. If you ever meet CrossFitters in person, you'll realize how small some of these people are.
It's true.
Like,
People
I
always
even
go on
forget.
about how big the women are. I'm like,
They're tiny.
They're so small. Like, it's just
Yeah.
camera puts on the pounds. That's why I'm sitting back here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like I saw you. I was like, oh, he's small. And then I saw Falcor, and then I was
Falcor's our dog.
like, Falcor's, he was cool, and
She fell in love with the dog before she fell in love with me.
well, yeah, probably. Because I wasn't coming to the CrossFit Games to start a relationship either.
No.
And then, you tell it really well. That's why I get you to tell it because you're better at telling it, and
Boom.
all the emotional stuff happened to me as well. That happened to you. I was like, oh, this guy's cool. We're like, I mean, I wasn't thinking about this at the time, but I do think looking back on it, we've talked about how like we're like soul
suckers. Seersucker. The jersey. No. Soulmates.
Swolemates.
Swolemates. Yes.
Yeah, I think back and I'm like, yeah, I mean that's the definition of a soulmate, really. If there ever was one for us, different countries, meet up, like have these like very, very eerily similar childhoods, and somehow are interested in the same thing. Somehow, obviously, that's what all led us to meeting each other, but definitely soulmate.
Yeah.
Status.
Yeah. And now, if you're wondering who we are now, basically we have 2 kids. We have Oaks, which is our oldest. He just turned 5, and Arrow, which is a 2-year-old. He'll be 2 in January. Mm-hmm. He and I share the exact same birthday. I got a pair of flip-flops and a child on my 30th birthday. The flip-flops did not last. The child is crushing it. Okay. And we currently own and operate a company called Warm Up and Workout, where we contract with CrossFit affiliates around the world and help them with building better coaches through lesson planning and mentoring. And I work for CrossFit headquarters, teaching level 1s and level 2s. And we do our very best to be parents, good parents, spending time with our kids and and just looking to love life with each other and the family that we have.
Mm-hmm.
That is us.
Yeah, I would like, add to that. I mean, you said it in a nutshell, really, looking to spend more time with the family, but I think because of our unique working situation, we have that ability to be able to spend more time with the kids and go wherever we can go within our means of, finances or schooling or whatever. So that's just what we're exploring right now. It might not be like that for forever. We might get sick of traveling. We might get sick of each other in a small van constantly. But for now, we really enjoy it. So we're just going to go with that.
Yeah. Welcome to the tribe life. And that is episode number 0. Thank you so much for listening to the entire thing. And remember, in the future, it's not going to be me rambling to myself for 15 straight minutes. It's going to be a conversation generally involving another couple where we're going to talk about being parents and the struggles they're having and the things they're going through, as well as the successes they're having, and just get as many perspectives on parenting as possible. We figured we'd start with that as just like a little bit of a story of how Taz and I met, so you can get a sense of who we are and a little bit of our backstory. Episode 1 should be out now as well, and you can check that out. That's a conversation between Taz and I where we just kind of go into interviewing each other about our thoughts on being parents and just some questions that we had for each other. Again, we look forward to doing many of these in the future. If you have suggestions on how we could do it better, we'd love to hear them. And we are always open to re-examining why we do what we do and how we do what we do. So that's all we got. Remember, don't be a dick to your kids. Later.